What does it feel like to stand at the edge of the world, wrapped in darkness and fog, knowing that somewhere out there in the black water, ships are moving toward rocks they cannot see? Imagine a place where the land ends and the sea begins, where cliffs drop away into churning waves, where the wind never truly stops and the salt air finds its way into everything you own. Tonight, we travel back to the Victorian era, to the remote coastlines of Britain where lighthouse keepers lived lives of profound isolation and quiet purpose, where a single flame burning through the night meant the difference between safe passage and disaster, between sailors returning home to their families and wooden holes splintering against granite. I want to ask one small thing of you. If you enjoy these journeys through forgotten corners of history, press that like button and subscribe so these quiet explorations can continue finding you in the peaceful hours. Now settle yourself more deeply into wherever you are resting tonight. Perhaps adjust your pillow, let your shoulders drop away from your ears, and allow your breathing to slow just slightly. We are about to enter a world that moved at a different pace, where time was measured by the rotation of a light and the rhythm of tides, where patience was not merely a virtue but a survival skill. Imagine yourself there now, standing on a narrow gallery that encircles the lantern room at the top of a lighthouse tower. The structure rises perhaps 30 meters above the rocks below, its white-painted walls catching whatever light the moon provides when it emerges briefly from the clouds. The gallery beneath your feet is made of cast iron, perforated to allow rainwater to drain through, and it is slick with moisture from the fog that has rolled in from the Atlantic. You grip the railing with hands that have grown strong from years of climbing these stairs, from hauling supplies, from the endless physical work that lighthouse keeping demands. The fog is thick tonight, thicker than you have seen in weeks, and it transforms the world into something small and close and strangely intimate. You cannot see the water below, cannot see the rocks, cannot see anything beyond perhaps 10 meters from where you stand. The beam of the lighthouse sweeps through this murk, illuminating nothing but swirling gray moisture, yet you know it is doing its work. Ships miles away, where the fog may be thinner or patchy, can see this light. They are adjusting their courses, noting their positions, steering away from the dangers that lurk beneath these waves. You cannot see them saving themselves, but you know it is happening, and this knowledge is what makes the isolation bearable. The sound of the sea is constant but muffled by the fog, a rhythmic pulse that seems to come from everywhere at once. Waves are breaking against the rocks at the base of the tower with a sound like distant thunder, like something massive and patient testing the strength of stone that has stood here for millennia. You have learned to read these sounds, to distinguish between the normal surge of tides and the more aggressive assault of storm waves, between the gentle lap of calm seas and the warning roar that means weather is changing. Tonight the sea sounds restless, but not angry, pushing against the land with steady determination rather than violent fury. Behind you, through the curved glass panels of the lantern room, the light continues its rotation. The mechanism that turns it is a marvel of Victorian engineering, a clockwork system of weights and gears that must be wound every few hours, that requires constant attention and maintenance to function properly. The light source itself is an oil lamp, burning colza oil with a carefully trimmed wick, its flame magnified many times over by the Fresnel lens that surrounds it. This lens, with its concentric rings of precisely ground glass, gathers the modest flame and transforms it into a beam visible for miles. A technological miracle that still fills you with wonder even after years of tending it. You turn and step back through the narrow door into the lantern room, feeling the relative warmth of the enclosed space after the damp chill of the gallery. The air here smells of burning oil, of metal warmed by the lamp, of the particular mustiness that accumulates in spaces that are never truly dry. The lens rotates slowly before you, its glass surfaces catching and fragmenting the flame into patterns that dance across the curved walls. You have cleaned this lens countless times, polished each section with soft cloths and precise movements, and you know its surfaces as intimately as you know your own face. Every nick, every slight imperfection in the glass, every scratch that has accumulated over decades of service is familiar to you. The lighthouse itself is your home, though calling it home feels both accurate and insufficient. You live here, certainly, in the small quarters, several floors below the lantern room. You sleep here, eat here, spend the majority of your days and nights within these curving stone walls. But home suggests comfort and permanence in ways that lighthouse life constantly challenges. The walls are always cold and often damp. The wind finds its way through every gap, howling around the tower on stormy nights with a sound that can make sleep impossible. The stairs that connect each level of the tower are narrow and worn, and you have climbed them so many times that your legs know the rhythm without conscious thought, your hand finding the rope handrail automatically in the darkness. Your family is here, or some of them. Your wife sleeps in the quarters below. In the small bedroom with its curved walls and single window facing away from the worst of the weather. She has adapted to this life as you have, learning to find satisfaction in small spaces and limited society, in the particular challenges of maintaining a household where fresh supplies arrive only when weather permits and where the nearest neighbor is miles away across difficult terrain. Your children, when they were young, grew up climbing these stairs, playing in the small courtyard at the base of the tower, learning to read the weather and respect the sea from almost before they could walk. They are grown now, most of them, living on the mainland with lives of their own, and the lighthouse is quieter for their absence. The isolation of this life is something that visitors cannot truly understand, though many have tried. Officials from Trinity House, the organization that maintains British lighthouses, come periodically to inspect the premises and evaluate your work. Scientists and engineers visit occasionally, studying the light or the weather or the peculiar conditions that prevail in such exposed locations. Even tourists sometimes make the difficult journey to see the lighthouse, curious about how anyone could choose to live in such a remote and demanding place. They stay for an hour or an afternoon, marveling at the view when weather permits, asking questions about the mechanisms and routines, and then they leave, returning to a world of streets and shops and the constant presence of other people. They cannot understand what it means to spend weeks at a stretch seeing no one except your immediate family. They cannot grasp the strange intimacy that develops between you and the sea. The way you come to recognize individual rocks by the pattern of waves breaking over them. The way you learn to predict weather changes by subtle shifts in the color of the water or the behavior of seabirds. They cannot comprehend the particular silence that descends when the wind drops and the fog rolls in. When the world contracts to the circumference of what your eyes can see and your ears become your primary connection to everything beyond that shrinking circle. The fog tonight creates exactly this condition. You stand in the lantern room, watching the beam sweep through nothingness, and you feel the peculiar peace that comes with such limitation. There is nothing you can do about the fog, nothing you can do about the ships that may or may not be out there navigating by your light. Your job is simply to keep the light burning, to maintain the rotation, to ensure that if any sailor looks toward this point of coast, they will see what they need to see to save themselves. This simplicity of purpose is one of the unexpected gifts of lighthouse keeping. In a world that often seems to demand impossible complexity, your task is clear and achievable. Keep the light burning. Everything else follows from that. The clockwork mechanism makes a soft clicking sound as its gears turn, measuring out time in rotations rather than seconds. You check the oil reservoir, noting the level, calculating how long before you will need to refill it. The wick burns evenly, requiring no immediate attention. But you examine it anyway because attention to detail is how disasters are prevented. In a few hours, you will need to wind the mechanism that drives the rotation, cranking the heavy weights back up to the top of the tower so they can descend again through the night. This is physical work that leaves your arms aching, but it is also meditative. The rhythmic motion of the crank handle becoming almost automatic while your mind wanders elsewhere. For now, you simply watch and wait, a guardian in the darkness, a keeper of the flame that has burned here in one form or another for more than a century. Ships are passing safely because of your vigilance. Sailors are alive who might otherwise have died on these rocks. This is the meaning of your life in this place, and on nights like tonight, when the fog wraps the world in cotton and the light seems to burn for no one, you hold on to that meaning like a rope in darkness. The evening ritual, the ritual begins before the sun has fully set. While there is still enough natural light to work by, but little enough that the transition to artificial illumination becomes necessary. You have learned over years of practice exactly when to begin, reading the quality of light through the lantern room windows, the way a sailor reads the sky for weather. On clear days in summer, this moment comes late, and you might eat your evening meal before climbing the stairs. On winter afternoons, especially when clouds hang low and heavy, you begin your preparations while the afternoon still nominally belongs to daylight. Tonight the fog has made the calculation simple. The light has been dim and diffuse all afternoon, struggling through layers of moisture that seem to thicken with each passing hour. You finished your dinner early, a simple meal of bread and salt beef and potatoes, eaten in the small kitchen where a coal stove provides both cooking heat and the primary warmth for the living quarters. Your wife ate with you, as she does most evenings, and you spoke of small things, of the supplies that need ordering, of a letter received from your daughter on the mainland, of the repair work needed on the boat landing before winter storms. Make it truly treacherous. These conversations are the texture of your life together, the accumulation of small moments that create intimacy over decades. You have been married for 23 years, have served at this lighthouse for 11 of them, and the routines you have developed together are as precise and comfortable as the mechanisms that turn the light. She knows without asking that you will leave the table before she does, that you will climb the stairs while she clears the dishes, that your evening will diverge into separate duties, that will reunite you only briefly, before one of you must climb to the lantern room for the first watch. The staircase spirals upward through the body of the tower, and you know each step by feel in the darkness. Your hand trails along the rope that serves as a handrail, a guide installed decades ago by some previous keeper whose name you never learned but whose practical wisdom you appreciate daily. The steps are stone, worn in the center by generations of footsteps, and you place your feet toward the outer edge where the treads are still relatively flat. 73 steps from the living quarters to the service room. Another 41 from the service room to the lantern room. You could climb them in your sleep, and on some exhausted mornings, you nearly do. The service room is your workshop, the space where you prepare everything needed to keep the light functioning. Here you store the oil that feeds the lamp, great casks of it delivered by tender ship several times a year. Here you keep the tools for maintenance, the wrenches and screwdrivers and specialized implements designed for the particular mechanisms of this lighthouse. Here you prepare the wicks, trim them to exactly the right length and shape, ready them for the moment when they will be needed. The room smells of oil and metal and the musty dampness that permeates everything in this marine environment. You check the oil cans that will go up to the lantern room tonight, ensuring they are full, that their spouts are clean and will pour properly. You examine the spare wicks, selecting the ones that are properly dried and prepared. You gather the cleaning cloths, the polishing materials, the small tools you might need during the night watch. This preparation is essential because once darkness falls fully and the light is burning, you cannot easily leave the lantern room to retrieve forgotten items. Everything must be ready. Everything must be at hand. And so you developed long ago this habit of careful preparation before ascending the lantern room. When you enter it, is still lit by the last gray daylight filtering through the curved glass panels. The lens stands silent and still, not yet rotating, its great glass sections catching the dim light and fragmenting it into soft rainbows on the walls. You stand for a moment simply looking at it, this marvel of engineering that is the purpose of everything else in this tower. A Fresnel lens of the first order, the largest type made, consisting of hundreds of precisely shaped glass prisms arranged in concentric rings around a central bull's eye. When the lamp is lit and the mechanism set in motion, this lens will gather the modest flame and project it outward with an intensity visible for 20 miles on a clear night. You begin with the lens itself, checking each section for any dust or moisture that might have accumulated since your morning cleaning. A soft cloth moves over the glass surfaces in practiced strokes, removing invisible contamination that could scatter the light and reduce its effectiveness. This cleaning must be thorough but gentle because the glass is irreplaceable. Any scratch or chip diminishing the lens's power permanently. You work slowly, methodically, allowing your hands to find the familiar contours while your mind settles into the meditative rhythm of the task. The lamp mechanism comes next. You check the burner assembly, ensuring the wick is properly positioned, that the chimney is clean and free of soot, that the oil reservoir is full and the feed mechanism functioning. The wick must be trimmed to exactly the right height, flat across the top with no irregularities that might cause uneven burning or smoking. You have trimmed thousands of wicks in your years of service and can judge the proper length by eye, but you still use the trimming guide because precision matters and habit is more reliable than confidence. Lighting the lamp is a moment of quiet ceremony, though you would never describe it that way to anyone who asked. You strike the match, watch the small flame catch and grow. Touch it to the wick and see the oil ignite with its particular golden light. The flame builds slowly as the wick draws fuel from the reservoir, stabilizing into a steady burn that will continue through the night as long as you maintain it. You adjust the flame height, check the draft, ensure that the burn is clean and even. Only when you are satisfied do you step back and prepare to set the mechanism in motion. The clockwork that rotates the lens is powered by a system of weights that descend slowly through a central shaft in the tower. Winding these weights to the top requires significant physical effort, and you grasp the crank handle with hands that have grown calloused from years of this work. The handle turns with a ratcheting sound, each click advancing the weights a small distance upward. You count the turns automatically, knowing exactly how many are required to raise the weights fully, feeling the increasing resistance as the system stores the potential energy that will be released over the coming hours with the weights wound. You release the brake that holds the mechanism still, and the lens begins its slow rotation. The movement is smooth and silent, the product of careful engineering and regular maintenance, and you watch for a moment to ensure everything is functioning properly. The beam of light sweeps outward through the glass panels, invisible from inside until it strikes the fog and illuminates a swirling wall of gray moisture. Then it passes on, and darkness returns until the rotation brings the beam around again. This rhythm will continue all night, a pulse of light cutting through whatever weather the sea provides. You step out onto the gallery to watch the first full rotation from outside, to see the light as passing ships would see it. The fog is even thicker now than when you last looked, and the beam illuminates nothing but itself, a bright streak cutting through gray nothingness. Yet somewhere out there, beyond this immediate murk, ships may be watching. They may be noting the distinctive pattern of this light, the particular timing of its flash, the color and intensity that distinguish it from other lights along this coast. Each lighthouse has its own character, designed specifically to be recognizable, and sailors memorize these patterns the way travelers memorize landmarks on familiar roads. The cold of the gallery seeps through your clothing, and you retreat back inside after satisfying yourself that the light is burning properly. The evening ritual is complete, and now the long watch begins. You settle into the chair that generations of keepers have worn smooth with their waiting. The chair positioned to give a view both of the lens mechanism and of the windows that look out toward the sea. From here, you can monitor everything, can intervene quickly if something goes wrong, can maintain the vigilance that is the fundamental requirement of your work. The sounds of the lighthouse surround you, the soft click of the clockwork mechanism, the hiss of the burning lamp, the distant, muffled crash of waves against the rocks far below. The wind, gentler tonight than it often is, finding its way around the tower with a sound like breathing. These are the sounds that will accompany you through the night, that will become so familiar you will notice only their absence. that will blend into a kind of white noise against which your thoughts will unfold through the long hours ahead. Your wife has come up the stairs to say good night, appearing in the doorway of the lantern room with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the cold. She crosses to where you sit and places a hand briefly on your shoulder, a touch that communicates more than words could in this moment. She will sleep now, or try to, in the quarters below, ready to wake if you need her, ready to take over the watch if you become ill or injured. This is the partnership that lighthouse keeping requires, the constant mutual support that makes the isolation bearable. She leaves, and you are alone with the light. The night stretches before you, hours of watching and waiting and maintaining the flame that burns because you are here to tend it. This is your purpose, your calling, the work that gives meaning to your days and nights. In this remote and beautiful and demanding place, the fog descends. The fog has a presence tonight that goes beyond mere weather. It presses against the windows of the lantern room like something alive, like something curious about the warmth and light inside. And when you step out onto the gallery, it wraps around you with an immediacy that is almost intimate. You can feel the moisture settling on your skin, beading on your clothing, and within minutes of standing outside, your hair is damp and the metal railing beneath your hands is slick with condensation. Fog at sea is not the gentle mist of inland valleys, the soft haze that burns off as the sun climbs. This fog is born from the meeting of warm and cold waters, from atmospheric conditions that can persist for days, from forces far too large for any human intervention. It rolls in from the open ocean with the inexorability of tide, and once it arrives, it stays until conditions change. You have seen fogs that lasted a week or more, that reduced the world to the dimensions of your own outstretched arms, that made every task more difficult and every moment more tense. The challenge of fog is that it defeats the primary purpose of the light. The beam that on clear nights can be seen for 20 miles shrinks in fog to a fraction of that distance, its light scattered and absorbed by billions of suspended water droplets. Ships that would normally navigate by the lighthouse's steady pulse find themselves blind, unable to see the very warning that might save them. For centuries, this was simply an accepted reality, a risk that sailors took when they put to sea. But Victorian ingenuity developed a partial solution in the form of fog signals. You make your way down the spiral stairs to the fog signal house, a smaller structure attached to the base of the tower that houses the machinery for producing warning sounds. This lighthouse uses a compressed air fog horn, one of the more modern installations, and you check the engine that powers the compressor. Ensure that the fuel supply is adequate. Verify that the horn mechanism is functioning properly. The machinery is loud and demanding, requiring constant attention when in operation. But it provides a sound that carries through fog in ways that light cannot. A deep bass moan that sailors can hear miles away and use to orient themselves. Starting the fog signal is a process that requires careful attention to sequence and timing. You fire the engine first, letting it warm up and build pressure in the system. The compressor begins its rhythmic pumping, charging the air tanks that will feed the horn. When the pressure reaches the proper level, you engage the timing mechanism that will sound the horn at regular intervals, creating the distinctive pattern assigned to this lighthouse. 2 long blasts, then a pause, then 1 short blast, then a longer pause. This sequence repeats endlessly while the fog persists. A voice calling out into the grayness to any ship that might be listening. The sound of the foghorn is immense and mournful, a sound that seems to come from the earth itself rather than from any human-made device. It vibrates through the stone of the tower, through the floor beneath your feet, through your chest and bones. You can feel it as much as hear it, and even after years of exposure, there is something in that sound that touches something deep and primitive, some ancient awareness of danger and warning. The horn falls silent, and the silence seems profound by contrast. And then the horn sounds again and again, maintaining its patient rhythm through the long hours of the night. The fog creates a strange acoustic environment where sounds behave in unexpected ways. The horn seems impossibly loud when you stand near it, yet you know from experience that fog can absorb and scatter sound almost as effectively as it scatters light. A ship might be closer than you think and still fail to hear the warning, or might be further than expected and hear it clearly. You cannot know, from your position in the lighthouse, how far your warnings are traveling, or who might be receiving them. You can only sound the horn and trust that it is doing its work. Between checking the fog signal machinery and climbing back to tend the light, you pause in the small doorway that connects the 2 structures. The fog surrounds you completely, pressing close, and you can see nothing of the sea or the rocks or the land beyond the immediate circle of the lighthouse compound. The beam from the lantern room sweeps overhead, briefly visible as a bright streak cutting through the murk before disappearing into gray nothingness. The horn sounds again, and you feel it in your bones. And somewhere out there in the invisible sea, perhaps a sailor hears it and adjusts course. The experience of fog is disorienting in ways that are difficult to explain to anyone who has not experienced it at sea. It removes landmarks, erases horizons, eliminates all the visual cues that normally help you understand where you are in space. Even here at the lighthouse, where you know every stone and every step, the fog creates moments of uncertainty, times when you are not quite sure which direction you are facing until you reach out and touch something familiar. For sailors approaching this coast without the aids of lighthouse and foghorn, the experience must be terrifying. A journey through blank grayness, where any moment might bring the sudden appearance of rocks too close to avoid. You think about the ships that might be out there tonight, the crews who are navigating through this same fog, facing this same disorientation on a moving platform surrounded by deadly water. You think about the captains standing on their bridges, straining to hear fog signals, watching for any break in the murk that might reveal their position. You think about the sailors keeping watch in the bows, listening for the sound of waves breaking on rocks. That would mean they had come too close to shore. These are your invisible charges, the people you will never meet, whose lives depend on your vigilance. And you feel the weight of that responsibility settling over you like the fog itself. The light in the lantern room needs attention, and you climb the stairs again, leaving the foghorn to its patient calling. The lamp is burning well, the flame steady and bright, but you check everything anyway, because complacency is how accidents happen. The oil level is good, the wick is burning evenly, the lens is rotating at its proper speed. You wipe a bit of moisture from one of the glass panels. Condensation that has formed on the inside surface, where warm, lamp-heated air meets cold glass. Every small attention matters. Every detail contributes to the whole. Standing in the lantern room, surrounded by the rotating light, you exist in a strange bubble of illumination, while the world beyond the windows is pure gray absence. The fog reflects the light back toward you, creating an effect almost like being inside a cloud, inside the brightness itself, rather than looking at it from outside. This inversion of normal perspective is common on foggy nights, and you have learned to find a certain beauty in it, a quality of being wrapped in light rather than projecting light outward. The fog creates silence as well as blindness. The normal sounds of the sea, the crash of waves, the cry of seabirds, the distant rumble of larger swells, all these are muffled and absorbed until the loudest sound is the mechanism of the lighthouse itself. The clicking of clockwork, the hiss of the burning lamp, the occasional creak of glass and metal, expanding and contracting with temperature changes. These small sounds become significant in the fog's silence, and you find yourself listening to them with attention that would be excessive. Under normal conditions, time moves differently in the fog, without visual markers to track the passage of hours, without the slow movement of stars across the sky or the changing quality of darkness that normally accompanies a night's progression. The minutes seem to stretch and contract unpredictably. You check your watch and are surprised to find that an hour has passed when it felt like 20 minutes, or that only 15 minutes have elapsed when it felt like an hour. This temporal distortion is common in conditions of sensory deprivation, and fog certainly qualifies, reducing the world to such limited dimensions that the normal cues for time's passage simply disappear. The foghorn sounds again, its deep voice carrying into the murk, and you wonder again about the ships that might be hearing it. On a night like this, captains will be making difficult decisions about whether to anchor and wait for better visibility, whether to proceed with extreme caution, whether to turn back if turning back is possible. You hope they are being careful, these invisible sailors whose lives touch yours without either party knowing it. You hope they are trusting the foghorn, following the sound, staying clear of the rocks that wait with infinite patience beneath the waves. The night continues, and the fog shows no sign of lifting. You settle into the rhythms of fog watching, the heightened attention, the frequent checks of every system, the periodic trips down to the fog signal house to ensure the machinery is still functioning. This is what lighthouse keeping becomes on foggy nights, a constant circuit of attention between light and sound, between the beam that cannot penetrate and the horn that might carry where sight fails. You are doing everything that can be done, maintaining everything that can be maintained, and the rest is beyond your control. The long watch, the hours between midnight and dawn, are the longest hours, the time when the body insists most strongly that it should be sleeping while the mind must remain alert. You have developed strategies over the years for navigating this difficult stretch, for keeping yourself awake and attentive when every cell wants to surrender to rest. These strategies are simple and practical, born from necessity rather than any particular wisdom, and they work well enough to get you through most nights without incident. Movement is essential. You cannot simply sit and watch the light for hours on end without falling into a stupor that differs little from sleep. So you walk, pacing the small circuit of the lantern room, stepping out onto the gallery when weather permits to feel the cold air against your face, descending the stairs periodically to check systems that do not strictly need checking, simply to force your legs to work and your blood to flow. This constant motion becomes a kind of dance with exhaustion, a negotiation between the demands of duty and the demands of the body. Tea helps, and you have developed the habit of keeping a small spirit stove in the service room, where you can heat water during the long watches. The ritual of making tea, the simple sequence of actions required, provides a focus for attention that might otherwise wander dangerously. You measure the tea leaves, add them to the pot, pour the hot water, wait for the brewing, pour the resulting liquid into your cup. These actions anchor you to the present moment, to the physical reality of the lighthouse, and the hot liquid warming your hands and throat pushes back against the cold and fatigue that want to claim you. You drink your tea standing at the window, looking out into the fog that has not lifted since sunset. The beam sweeps past every 30 seconds, briefly illuminating the gray murk, revealing nothing but itself before passing on. The foghorn sounds its patient rhythm from below. 2 long blasts, a pause, 1 short blast, a longer pause, repeating endlessly into the night. These are the sounds and sights of your vigil, the companions that accompany you through the small hours. Your mind wanders in the quiet times between checks and tasks, following paths that seem to choose themselves without conscious direction. You think about your children, grown now and scattered to various corners of the country. Your eldest son is a clerk in a shipping company in Bristol, using the knowledge of the sea he gained growing up in lighthouses to work with manifests and cargo schedules rather than sails and tides. Your daughter is married to a school teacher in Devon, has 2 children of her own, whom you see too rarely because the journey is long and the lighthouse demands constant attendance. Your youngest is still finding his way, working various jobs in various places, not yet settled into the life he will eventually lead. You wonder sometimes if you did right by them, raising them in this isolation, giving them childhoods so different from what other children experienced. They had the sea and the sky and the wild beauty of remote coastlines. They had parents who were present, not absent at factories or offices for long hours every day. They had education, lessons conducted by their mother in the lighthouse keeper's quarters, books brought in by tendership and read by lamplight through long winter evenings. But they did not have the society of other children, did not have the easy formation of friendships that comes from shared classrooms and neighborhood play, did not have the experience of being ordinary in any way when they visit now as adults. They speak of their childhoods with a mixture of affection and something that might be wistfulness, and you cannot always tell if they are grateful for what you gave them or if they wonder what they missed. Probably both, you think. Probably both at once. The way that every significant experience carries both blessing and cost. The way that every choice made is also a choice against something else. Your wife chose this life with you, made the decision consciously when you were both young and the future seemed flexible in ways that adulthood reveals to be illusory. She came from a coastal town, was familiar with the sea and the particular communities that form around maritime work. but she had never experienced true isolation until your first posting together. A lighthouse on a rocky promontory in Wales, where the nearest village was 5 miles of difficult walking, and the weather made that walk impossible more days than not. She adapted as you adapted, finding satisfactions in small accomplishments and developing the mental resilience that isolation requires. You think about her sleeping in the quarters below, wrapped in blankets against the cold that never quite leaves these stone walls, and you feel gratitude for her presence that has not diminished in 23 years of marriage. She will wake in a few hours to take her turn at the watch, allowing you to sleep through the morning while she tends the light and monitors the systems. This is the rhythm you have developed, the division of labor that allows both of you to function despite the demands of round-the-clock vigilance. Without her, you would long ago have burned out, fallen ill, made mistakes that might have cost lives. The lighthouse creaks around you, settling on its foundations, responding to temperature changes and wind pressure and the million small forces that act constantly on any structure. You have learned to distinguish between normal sounds and concerning sounds, between the expected groaning of metal and stone and the unexpected noises that might indicate damage or malfunction. Tonight, all the sounds are familiar, part of the symphony you have been hearing for years, and you listen to them with the half-attention of long familiarity. The fog has not lifted, and you do not expect it to before dawn at the earliest. The foghorn continues its calling, the light continues its rotation, and you continue your patient watch. This is the essence of lighthouse keeping, this endurance through the long hours when nothing happens except the quiet maintenance of systems that prevent disaster. The work is not dramatic or exciting, does not involve the kind of visible heroism that earns medals and newspaper coverage. It is simply presence, vigilance, the willingness to stay awake and attentive when the world is dark and empty and the body desperately wants rest. You think about the nature of this work, about what it means to spend a life in service that is largely invisible. The ships that pass safely never know they were in danger, never know that the light or the foghorn guided them around obstacles they would otherwise have struck. The sailors whose lives you save will never thank you, will never even know that thanks are owed, because the success of your work is measured in non-events, in collisions that do not occur, in drownings that do not happen, in families that are not left mourning. This is the peculiar quality of preventive work, that its triumphs are invisible and its failures catastrophic. You have witnessed failure only twice in your career, have seen ships founder despite the warnings, have watched helplessly from the lighthouse as vessels struck rocks and broke apart in the churning sea. Both times you did what you could, which was nearly nothing, because the lighthouse is positioned to warn, not to rescue. And by the time a ship is close enough to be seen from the tower, it is usually too far into disaster for any intervention to help. You helped launch boats after the fact, helped pull survivors from the water, helped recover bodies when there were no survivors. These memories do not fade, do not become less vivid with time, and they are part of why you maintain your vigilance so carefully, why you check every system multiple times per night, why you never allow yourself to become complacent. The watch continues, hour after hour, and you fall into a rhythm that is almost meditative, a state of alert relaxation where you are fully present but not straining. Your body has learned how to do this, how to maintain readiness without tension, and you move through your tasks with the ease of long practice. Check the lamp. Wind the mechanism when needed. Monitor the fog signal. Drink tea. Walk the gallery when the fog allows. Wait for dawn. Dawn, when it comes, will not be dramatic on a night like this. The fog will simply grow lighter, shifting from dark gray to light gray to a kind of luminous white. The transition will be gradual, almost imperceptible, and you will become aware that you can see further than you could an hour ago, without being able to identify the moment when the change began. This is how most nights end for the lighthouse keeper. Not with blazing sunrise, but with slow diminishment of darkness, with the gradual return of a visible world. But dawn is still hours away, and you have the remainder of the night to navigate. You settle into your chair again, wrapping a blanket around your shoulders against the cold, positioning yourself where you can see both the lamp mechanism and the windows. The light rotates, the horn sounds, the fog presses against the glass, and you keep your watch, patient and persistent, a guardian in the darkness, doing work that matters precisely because it will never be celebrated. A keeper's life story. Let me tell you now about a man named William Darling, though that was not his real name. I use a different name to protect the privacy of his descendants. But the essential facts of his life are true, drawn from records and accounts that survive in the archives of Trinity House, the organization that has maintained British lighthouses since the 16th century. William was a lighthouse keeper for 37 years, serving at 5 different stations along the coasts of England and Wales. And his life illustrates both the demands and the quiet satisfactions of this peculiar profession. William was born in 1832, the 4th child of a fisherman in a small village on the northeast coast. His early years were shaped by the sea in the way that all fishing community children's lives were shaped, learning to read weather and tides, to handle boats, to respect the power of water that could provide livelihood one day and take life the next. His father drowned when William was 11, caught in a sudden storm that overwhelmed his small vessel before he could reach shelter. And this loss marked the boy in ways that influenced his entire subsequent life. The family struggled after the father's death, as fishing families always struggled when they lost their primary breadwinner. William's mother took in washing and mending. His older brothers went to sea at ages younger than they should have, and William himself worked whatever jobs were available to children in a coastal village. He carried messages, helped with boat repairs, gathered shellfish from the rocks at low tide. He developed early the habit of hard work and the understanding that survival required constant effort. At 17, William enlisted in the Royal Navy, driven partly by adventure and partly by the promise of regular meals and steady wages. He served for 8 years, rising to the rank of able seaman, learning navigation and seamanship at a professional level that far exceeded his childhood experience. He sailed to the Mediterranean, to the Caribbean, to the distant waters of the Pacific, and he saw enough of the world to know that what he wanted most was a life of stability, a place where he could settle and know that he would wake in the same location tomorrow as today. The Navy led indirectly to lighthouse keeping. A fellow sailor mentioned that Trinity House was always looking for men with maritime experience and steady temperaments, men who could handle the isolation and the responsibility William applied upon his discharge, was interviewed by officials who asked probing questions about his background, his character, his ability to maintain complex machinery and keep accurate records. They offered him a position as assistant keeper at a lighthouse in Cornwall, and he accepted, not knowing that he was beginning a career that would last the rest of his working life. The learning curve was steep but not impossible for a man with William's experience. The mechanics of the light, the oil lamps and Fresnel lenses and clockwork rotation systems were complex but logical, and his naval training had given him familiarity with maintaining equipment under difficult conditions. The isolation was more challenging than he had expected, but less challenging than the isolation of a long naval voyage where the same small group of men were confined together for months at a time with no escape from each other's company. At least at the lighthouse, he had privacy, could retreat to his own thoughts without constant social demands. He married at 29, a woman named Margaret, whom he met during one of his leaves at a nearby town. She was the daughter of a shopkeeper, accustomed to a busier social life than lighthouse keeping would provide. But something about William's steadiness attracted her, and something about her cheerfulness attracted him. They were married in a small ceremony, and she moved immediately to the lighthouse, beginning her education in the particular demands of her new life. The early years were hardest for Margaret. She had not fully understood what isolation meant until she experienced weeks without seeing anyone except William, until she realized that the small round rooms of the lighthouse were her entire world during the months when weather made travel to the mainland impossible. She cried often during the first winter, missing her family, missing the casual social interactions that she had never realized were so important to her well-being. William did what he could to help, but his own nature tended toward solitude, and he sometimes failed to understand the depth of her need for human connection. They reached an accommodation, as married couples do, each adapting to the other's needs and limitations. Margaret learned to find satisfaction in the routines of lighthouse keeping, in the quiet accomplishments of maintaining a household under difficult conditions. William learned to talk more, to share his thoughts and experiences instead of keeping them locked inside, to recognize that his wife needed words the way the lamp needed oil. The marriage became stronger for having weathered this difficult period, and when their children began arriving, they faced the new challenges of parenthood with confidence that they could handle. Whatever came, William advanced through the ranks of lighthouse service, moving from assistant keeper to principal keeper, from smaller stations to larger ones, each move bringing greater responsibility and slightly better pay. He served at lights on rocky promontories and lights on isolated islands, at lights that could be reached by road and lights accessible only by boat. He experienced every kind of weather the British coast could produce, from gentle summer calms to winter storms that shook the tower and made him wonder if the structure would hold. The incident that defined his career occurred during a November storm in 1871, when William was 40 years old and serving as principal keeper at a lighthouse on the Welsh coast. A ship had attempted to make harbor during a brief lull in the weather and had been caught when the storm intensified unexpectedly. William watched from the lantern room as the vessel struggled against winds that pushed it inevitably toward the rocks, and he knew with terrible certainty that there was nothing he could do to prevent what was about to happen. the ship struck at 11:30 at night, close enough to the lighthouse that William could hear the cracking of timber over the roar of the wind. He watched the vessel break apart, watched figures scrambling on the tilting deck, watched some of them disappear into the churning water, while others clung to whatever wreckage remained above the surface. The lifeboat station was miles away and could not possibly arrive in time, and William's own small boat was far too fragile to survive in such conditions. What William did next was not exactly heroic in the conventional sense. He could not launch a rescue, could not bring the survivors to safety through the raging sea, but he could and did keep the light burning at maximum intensity, providing a fixed point of reference for anyone still alive in the water. He could and did signal to the survivors that help was aware of their situation, using the lighthouse's emergency lantern to communicate in ways that sailors would understand. And when the storm finally abated enough to allow launching his boat, he was the first to reach the wreckage, pulling 3 survivors from the water who had clung to debris through the night, partly because they could see the lighthouse and knew that someone was watching over them. The 3 survivors credited William with their lives, not because he rescued them from the water in any immediate sense, but because seeing the light steady and the signals from the tower gave them hope during the long hours when hope seemed foolish. One of them wrote a letter to Trinity House praising William's actions, and this letter made its way into official records, where it remained as testament to a night when keeping the light burning was itself an act of salvation. Served for another 18 years after that night, maintaining his careful attention to duty, never speaking much about the wreck or his role in it, never claiming heroism for doing what he considered simply his job. He retired in 1889 at the age of 57, his health beginning to fail after decades of cold and damp and the physical demands of lighthouse work. He and Margaret moved to a small cottage in the town where they had married, and he spent his remaining years watching the sea from a comfortable distance, rising early from habit rather than necessity, always aware of weather and tide even when they no longer directly concerned him. He died in 1894 and was buried in the churchyard overlooking the harbor where fishing boats still came and went with the tides. His gravestone gives only his name, his dates, and the single word keeper, which was enough to identify his life's work to anyone who understood what that word meant. Margaret survived him by another decade, tending his grave, telling stories about lighthouse life to grandchildren who could barely imagine such isolation, keeping alive the memory of a man who had spent his best years keeping alive a flame. Dawn approaches. The first sign of dawn is not light, but sound. A subtle change in the quality of the night that you have learned to recognize after years of watching through to morning. The fog has thinned slightly, not enough to see through, but enough to change how sounds carry. And you become aware that the sea below sounds different, that the waves are striking the rocks with a rhythm that suggests the tide has turned. These are the small signals that morning is approaching, even before any light appears in the eastern light. You check your watch and confirm what your body already knows. It is 5:30, and sunrise, such as it will be on a foggy morning, is perhaps an hour away. The night watch is nearly over, the long hours of vigilance almost complete, and you feel the particular relief that comes with having successfully navigated another stretch of darkness. Nothing went wrong. The light burned steadily. The foghorn sounded its rhythm, and whatever ships were out there in the murk passed safely through the dangers of this coast, as precise in their way as the rituals that began the evening. You start with the lamp, reducing the flame slightly in preparation for extinguishing it once daylight makes the light unnecessary. The oil consumption of these lamps is significant, and there is no point in burning fuel once the sun has risen, and natural light provides adequate warning to mariners. You check the oil level, note it in your mental ledger. Calculate how many more nights of burning remain before the reservoir needs refilling. The fog signal can be shut down once visibility improves enough to make it unnecessary. But on a morning like this one, with fog still pressing against the windows, you will keep it running for some hours yet. You descend the stairs to check the machinery, ensure that fuel and oil levels are adequate for continued operation. Make small adjustments to keep everything running smoothly. The engine that powers the compressor has been working all night and is warm to the touch, radiating heat into the small fog signal house that is welcome after the cold of the lantern room. Your wife appears in the doorway of the fog signal house, wrapped in a heavy shawl against the morning chill, having risen to begin her day's work and to relieve you from the watch. Her face shows the softness of recent sleep, and her eyes take a moment to adjust to the dim light of the fog-shrouded morning. She carries 2 cups of tea, having started the kettle before climbing down from the living quarters, and you accept yours with gratitude, wrapping cold hands around the warm ceramic dot. You give her the report of the night, the quiet summary that passes between keepers at each change of watch. The fog has been thick since sunset. The horn has been sounding continuously. The light has burned without incident. Nothing remarkable happened, which is the best possible outcome, the sign of a night where everything functioned as it should. She listens and nods, absorbing the information, preparing herself mentally for the hours ahead when she will maintain the same vigilance that occupied you through the darkness. The transition of watch is a moment of connection between you, a brief intersection of your separate rhythms before diverging again into sleep and wakefulness. You speak of small domestic matters, of tasks that need attention, of supplies running low, of a letter that should be written to one of the children. These conversations stitch together the fabric of your shared life, maintaining continuity despite the strange schedule that lighthouse keeping imposes. You climb the stairs one more time, ascending to the lantern room to properly hand over the watch. The light is still burning, still rotating, and you show your wife the current state of everything, pointing out the oil level, the condition of the wick, the small moisture accumulation on the inner windows that should be wiped away when she has a chance. She has done this work as long as you have and knows everything you are telling her. But the ritual of formal handover matters, ensures that nothing is overlooked in the transition. Then you descend, leaving her alone with the light and the fog and the steady rhythm of the horn, and you make your way down the spiral stairs toward sleep. The quarters feel warmer after a night in the lantern room, though by any objective measure they are still cold, and you remove your outer layers slowly, feeling the weariness in your shoulders and back from hours of maintained alertness. The bed, when you reach it, seems like the most welcoming thing in the world. The blankets piled high against the cold, the pillow worn into the perfect shape by years of use. Sleep comes quickly when you have been awake through the night, rushing in like the tide filling a rocky pool, and you surrender to it. Your dreams, if you have any, will be fragments, impressions without narrative, bits of the night just past, mixed with memories and imaginings in combinations that will make no sense if you try to recall them later. This is the quality of sleep after night watch, deep but somehow incomplete. The body resting while some part of the mind remains attuned to the lighthouse around you, ready to wake if anything goes wrong. The morning passes while you sleep, the fog slowly lifting as the sun climbs higher and the temperature differential that created it begins to equalize. Your wife will note the improving visibility, will shut down the foghorn when conditions permit, will eventually extinguish the light and begin the daytime maintenance that keeps everything ready for the next night. These are her hours now, her responsibilities, and you trust her to manage them as she trusts you to manage the night. You wake sometime in the early afternoon, not to any alarm, but simply because your body has taken what rest it can from the available hours. The quality of light in the bedroom tells you the fog has mostly cleared, pale sunshine filtering through the small window, and you lie for a moment, simply appreciating the feeling of wakefulness, returning slowly rather than being jerked into consciousness by emergency. The afternoon will bring its own work, the maintenance tasks that occupy a lighthouse keeper's daylight hours. There is brass to polish and glass to clean and machinery to inspect and logs to write and 100 small jobs that collectively keep the lighthouse functioning. But for now, in this moment between sleep and activity, you simply rest, feeling the steady beating of your heart and the quiet functioning of your breath, aware that you have successfully completed another night of keeping the light burning for whoever needed it. The sea is visible through the window now, gray-green and restless, dotted with whitecaps that suggest wind has picked up since the fog departed. Somewhere out there, ships are moving, carrying cargo and passengers to destinations around the world. Their captains reading charts and watching for landmarks and noting the positions of lighthouses along their routes. Tonight, when darkness falls, you will light the lamp again, will set the mechanism in motion, will begin another watch in the endless sequence of watches that is a lighthouse keeper's life. But that is tonight, and this is now, and now is a moment of rest between efforts, a pause in the rhythm of vigilance. You close your eyes again, not to sleep, but simply to appreciate the darkness behind your lids, the relief of not needing to watch anything, not needing to maintain alertness, not needing to be the guardian of anything except your own breathing body in its comfortable bed. The meaning of the light there is a moment in every lighthouse keeper's career when the abstract becomes concrete, when the purpose of all those hours of vigilance crystallizes into something that can be understood not just intellectually, but viscerally. For some keepers, this moment comes through disaster, through witnessing a wreck that the light could not prevent, or helping to rescue survivors who speak of how they followed the beam to safety. For others, it comes more quietly, through a letter from a captain expressing gratitude, through a chance meeting with a sailor who mentions in passing that your light guided him home on a difficult night. The meaning of the light is not something you think about during the ordinary hours of keeping it. When you are trimming the wick or polishing the lens, or winding the clockwork mechanism. You are focused on the task at hand, on the immediate practical requirements of your work. The light is simply something that must be maintained, must be kept burning, must rotate at its proper speed and burn at its proper intensity. It is machinery and fuel and glass and metal, physical objects requiring physical attention, but in the quiet hours, in the moments between tasks when the light rotates smoothly and the night stretches out in all directions, the meaning can become present in a way that is almost overwhelming. You stand at the window of the lantern room, watching the beam sweep out into darkness, and you understand with sudden clarity that somewhere, invisible to you, a ship is seeing that beam and using it to navigate safely past the rocks that would otherwise destroy it. Lives are being saved at this very moment by the light you are tending, and you will never know whose lives, will never meet the sailors or their families, will never receive any acknowledgement of what you have done. This anonymity of service is one of the most distinctive features of lighthouse keeping. Soldiers who save lives in battle may be decorated and celebrated. Doctors who save lives in hospitals may be thanked by grateful patients and their families. But lighthouse keepers who save lives through their vigilance receive no such recognition, because the saving happens at a distance, invisibly, in the form of disasters that simply do not occur. You cannot prove a negative, cannot demonstrate that a ship would have struck rocks if the light had not been burning, and so the service remains invisible, known only to the keeper and perhaps to God if God takes interest in such matters. This invisibility can be discouraging to those who need external validation, who require appreciation and recognition to feel that their work matters. Lighthouse keeping is not a profession for such people. It is a profession for those who can find satisfaction in duty itself, in the knowledge that the work is important regardless of whether anyone notices or acknowledges it. It is a profession for those who can sustain themselves through long stretches of isolation with no company but their own thoughts and the constant demands of the machinery they tend. The lighthouse itself becomes a kind of companion over years of service, an entity with its own personality and quirks and requirements. You learn its sounds, the particular creak of its stairs, the way the wind whistles around its galleries, the specific frequency at which its foghorn resonates. You learn its vulnerabilities, the places where water tends to infiltrate, the joints where metal contracts in cold weather, the mechanisms that require the most frequent attention. You learn its strengths, the solidity of its construction, the reliability of its systems when properly maintained, the way it has stood against storms for decades and will stand for decades more. The light at the heart of all. This is not just illumination. It is a message sent out into the darkness, a statement that someone is here, someone is watching, someone cares whether you live or die. Sailors approaching this coast know that behind the light is a human presence, a person who has chosen to spend their nights in vigilance so that others can travel safely. This human element is part of what the light means, part of its message. It says not just here are rocks, steer clear, but also you are not alone. Someone is watching over you. Someone wants you to survive. The responsibility of keeping that message burning is not something you think about constantly, because to do so would be paralyzing. If you dwelt continuously on the lives depending on your attention, you would become so anxious that you could not function. Instead, you focus on the practical tasks, on the immediate requirements of maintenance and monitoring, and you trust that doing your job properly will accomplish the larger purpose that those tasks serve. This is the professional mindset of the lighthouse keeper. The ability to be fully present in the small details while carrying awareness of the larger meaning lightly. As background rather than foreground, there are nights when this balance is difficult to maintain. When something brings the meaning rushing forward into consciousness with uncomfortable intensity. Perhaps news has reached you of a wreck elsewhere on the coast. A reminder that lights and foghorns sometimes fail to save everyone. Perhaps weather conditions are particularly severe, and you find yourself imagining the ships that might be struggling through the storm, wondering if your light is visible through the rain and spray, worrying that your vigilance might not be enough. On such nights, the responsibility feels heavy in a way that is almost physical, a weight on your shoulders that makes every task more effortful. But most nights, the meaning remains where it should, a steady presence that gives purpose to the work without overwhelming the worker. You maintain the light because it needs maintaining, and you do not need to articulate why beyond that immediate necessity. The lives being saved are real, even if invisible, and your contribution to their survival is real, even if unacknowledged. This is enough. This is what it means to be a keeper of the light. The lighthouse will outlast you, as it has outlasted all the keepers who came before you. The light will burn when you are gone, tended by hands not yet born, serving sailors whose great-grandparents have not yet met. This continuity across generations is part of what the lighthouse means. This statement that the work matters enough to be maintained indefinitely, that the protection of maritime life is a perpetual commitment rather than a temporary convenience. You are part of something larger than yourself, a chain of keepers stretching back centuries and forward into an indefinite future, all of you joined by the common purpose of keeping the light burning through the darkness. This awareness of continuity provides its own kind of comfort, its own kind of meaning. You are not alone in your tower, not really, because you are connected to everyone who has ever done this work and everyone who ever will. The techniques you use were developed and refined by keepers before you, and you will pass on what you have learned to keepers who come after. The light itself is the same light that has burned here for generations, the same flame renewed each night, the same beam sweeping out over the same water. In keeping this light, you are keeping faith with all who kept it before, maintaining a tradition that gives individual effort significance beyond its immediate effects. Closing and sleep, invitation, and so we come to the end of our journey through the fog and firelight of a Victorian lighthouse, through the long watches and patient rituals, through the isolation and purpose that defined these keepers' lives. We have stood on the gallery in the cold, salt air, have tended the flame that burned against the darkness, have listened to the foghorn calling its warnings into the gray murk. We have felt what it might have been like to carry the weight of invisible lives on our shoulders, to do work that mattered precisely because its success left no trace. The lighthouse keeper, whose night we have shared, is settling now into the rhythms of day. The watch handed over, the long vigilance of darkness replaced by the different work that daylight brings. He will sleep through the morning, as he always does, trusting his wife to maintain the systems, trusting the fog to lift and the light to be unnecessary until evening comes again. This is the pattern of his life, the oscillation between wakefulness and rest, between the lantern room and the quarters below, between the vast responsibility of the night and the ordinary, domestic tasks of day. The fog has lifted now over the waters that surround the lighthouse, and pale sunshine falls on waves that glitter and shift in the wind. Ships are visible in the distance, small shapes moving along the horizon, their courses adjusted to avoid the rocks that wait beneath the surface near this point of coast. The sailors aboard those ships may or may not notice the lighthouse as they pass, may or may not think about the keeper who spent the night watching over their passage. It does not matter whether they notice. The light did its work regardless, and they are safe regardless. And that is all that matters. Let yourself now begin to drift away from the lighthouse, to feel the distance growing between you and that white tower on its rocky promontory. You have been there through the night, have shared the keeper's vigil. But now you are returning to your own world, your own time, your own particular circumstance. The sounds of the lighthouse are fading. The crash of waves and the cry of gulls and the rhythmic pulse of the foghorn growing softer and more distant with each breath. You take dot. You do not need to keep watch tonight. You do not need to tend any flame or monitor any mechanism or listen for sounds of ships in distress. Your only task now is rest, is the simple and profound act of allowing your body to relax and your mind to release its grip on wakefulness. Whatever concerns followed you into this moment, whatever thoughts and worries and plans were occupying you when you began to listen, you can set them down now. They will still be there in the morning if you need them. For now, they can wait. The lighthouse keeper understood something important about the rhythm of vigilance and rest, about the impossibility of maintaining alertness indefinitely and the necessity of surrendering to sleep when the watch is done. He did not fight his exhaustion when morning came, did not try to push through to some different schedule or resist the body's demands. He simply lay down and slept, trusting that he had done his work and that rest was now his proper occupation. You can trust the same thing now. Whatever your own work is, whatever responsibilities you carry, you have done what can be done for today. The night is for rest, for the repair and restoration that sleep provides, for the mysterious processing that happens in dreams. You do not need to solve anything right now, do not need to plan anything, do not need to maintain any kind of vigilance. You can simply let go, feel your body settling more deeply into wherever you are resting. Feel the weight of your limbs becoming heavier. Feel the muscles of your face and shoulders and back, releasing tension you may not have known you were holding. The breath moves in and out without any effort on your part, a rhythm as constant as the rotation of a lighthouse beam, as reliable as the tide. You do not need to control your breathing or think about it. You can simply allow it to continue as it always has, as it always will, carrying you gently toward sleep. The sounds around you now, whatever they are, can become like the sounds of the lighthouse, a kind of ambient presence that accompanies rather than disturbs. Perhaps there is traffic in the distance, or the hum of appliances, or the quiet settling of a building at night. These are the sounds of safety, the sounds of a world continuing its business while you rest. They do not require your attention, do not require any response. They are simply there, like the crash of waves against the lighthouse rocks, like the wind around the tower, like all the sounds that accompanied the keeper through his long watch. The light continues to burn. Somewhere in the space between history and imagination, somewhere in the realm where stories live on after they are told, the keeper continues his endless round of vigilance and rest, of night watches and daytime maintenance, of keeping the flame alive for sailors he will never meet. This is his purpose, his contribution to a world that largely ignores him, and he is content with it, has made peace with the invisible nature of his service. You too have purposes that may sometimes feel invisible, contributions that may go unacknowledged, work that matters even when no one seems to notice. Tonight, as you rest, you can let that work go, can trust that it will still matter in the morning, can allow yourself the same restoration that the keeper takes when he descends from the lantern room and surrenders to sleep. The work will wait, the purposes will remain. For now, there is only this moment, this breath, this gentle dissolution of wakefulness into something softer and more peaceful. The beam sweeps out over the dark water one more time, illuminating nothing but its own patient rotation. And then the image fades, and the story fades, and you are left only with the warmth of wherever you are resting and the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. The keeper sleeps. The light burns on without him, maintained by other hands, serving the same eternal purpose. And you too can sleep now, can let the night carry you wherever it will, can trust that morning will come with its own demands and its own possibilities. Sleep well tonight, wrapped in whatever warmth surrounds you, protected by whatever walls shelter you from weather. You do not need to keep any light burning. You do not need to listen for any warning sounds. You do not need to maintain any vigilance at all. Your only work now is rest, and you can do that work simply by letting go, by allowing your thoughts to drift and settle like fog lifting from the sea, by breathing slowly and easily as the night wraps gently around you. The lighthouse stands on its rocky point, has stood for generations, will stand for generations more. The light burns through the darkness, warning sailors away from danger, guiding them safely past the rocks. And somewhere, in a small room below the lantern, a keeper sleeps, having done his work for another night, having kept his watch, having maintained the flame that keeps others alive. He dreams of nothing, or of everything, and the morning light falls soft across his sleeping face, and the sea continues its eternal conversation with the shore, and the world turns slowly toward another day. Rest now, rest well. Let sleep come as gently as fog rolling in from the sea, as naturally as the tide responding to the moon's pull. You have traveled far tonight, through history and imagination, through a world of vigilance and purpose and quiet heroism. Now you can return to yourself, to this moment, to the simple act of resting in safety while the night continues around you. The light burns on, the keeper sleeps, and so can you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please subscribe and leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be as peaceful as a calm sea beneath a patient, turning light. Share.